Oh, but first, before I forget, let's take a look at the book. Reading Rainbows next week, in case you were wondering. Yeah, let's compare this episode to the book. There's definitely something in here about dancing school, and see if I can find what that was. Okay, in the original Harriet the Spy book, chapter 4, there's a scene where Harriet visits Janie, and Harriet says, "What's the matter?" Harriet whispered. They were standing in the little foyer off the living room. "They're after me," whispered Janie, still smiling wildly. "Who?" "The Rat Pack." This was what Janie called her mother, her father, her brother, and her grandmother who lived with them. Fortunately, she didn't call them that in the show. "Why?" "My mother says I'm going to blow us all up, and I have to go to dancing school. Come past here, then they won't see us." Jeannie was hissing through her outrageous smile as she led them up the back steps to what she called her lab, but which was really her room. And then it goes on to talk about Jeannie wanting to be a scientist, and she does all these experiments in her room and stuff. The way the book describes it, it says the lab itself was very complex and frightened Harriet whenever she looked at it, although she never would have admitted this to Janie. It consisted of rows and rows of shelves filled with bottles, all filled with suspicious fluids, and looking as though you would turn into Mr. Hyde if you drank them. Only Janie understood anything whatever about them, and she wouldn't explain, but instead called everyone a cretin who asked her. The maids wouldn't go near Janie's room, so years ago she had to learn to clean it herself. And then Janie's afraid that her folks might make her get rid of all her science stuff, and says that if that happens, then Janie would run away. And then Harriet asks later on, "What is this about dancing school?" And Janie says, "Just wait, buddy. They're going to get you too. I heard my mother talking to your mother. Whoever heard of Pasteur going to dancing school? Or Madame Curie? Or Einstein?" Janie spit out the names. Harriet couldn't think of any spies who went to dancing school either. This was a bad development. "Whether they know it or not, I'm not going," Harriet said firmly. "They will never get me," Janie said very loudly. Then in a different tone, "Hey, Harriet, I've got to finish this experiment." Then after Harriet writes a few things in her notebook, Janie screws up one of her mixtures. She was trying to put some chemicals together to make something, but it didn't turn out right. Janie says, "Oh boy, that is maddening." "What happened?" Harriet looked up. "I goofed," Janie said. "If I had done it right, I would have made a terrific noise." "What would your mother have done?" "That's who the noise was for, silly. If they think I'll set foot in a dancing school, they're off their rockers." "Well, why don't you blow up the dancing school?" Harriet asked sensibly. "Oh, they just find another place to have it," says Janie. "I know this kind of thing. Once they get this kind of thing in their heads, forget it. The only way out is to absolutely refuse. My mother hates to spend money, that's one thing, so if she can make a joke out of my not wanting to, then I'm in the clear because then she can save the money." Harriet knew what she meant. Mrs. Gibbs tried to make a bad joke out of everything. Mrs. Welsh always spoke of Janie's mother as, "that smart-nosed Mabel Gibbs." Harriet thought to herself that one thing she couldn't stand was the kind of person who thought she was funny when she wasn't. I'm with you on that one, Harriet. And Janie went on, "See if she can get across to her friends the idea that I'm an impossible eccentric, that it wouldn't be your fault that I'm not in dancing school," Janie went on. "And as for me, I couldn't care less if I learned to dance. I've got a big picture of Newton learning the Charleston." And so we skip ahead to the next page, and then Mrs. Gibbs, Janie's mother, comes into the room and starts talking to Harriet. She says, "Talked to your mother the other day. Has Janie told you about dancing school? Your mother is all for it, and I am too. You girls need a few graces, you know. Turning into young women any day now. Don't want to be clumps on the dance floor. Nothing more embarrassing than a wallflower. Your mother's worried about the way you move, Harriet." Hey, there's two direct references right there. Mrs. Gibbs had mentioned not wanting Janie to be a clump on the dance floor. And there was also that part where Harriet's mom was concerned about the way Harriet moved. "Oh, yep, here we go," Harriet says. "Fast. That's the way I move. Fast. What's wrong with that?" And the book continues. Mrs. Gibbs stared at her. Janie went back to her lab table. Mrs. Gibbs, not having any idea how to take Harriet's comment, decided, as she always did, that the best thing was to laugh it off. She gave an enormous whoop of laughter. Harriet saw Janie's shoulders go up in a quick little embarrassed cringe. "Well, now, aren't you something? Wait till I tell Harry that. You're as bad as Janie." She laughed a lot more for good measure. "Well, we'll just see about that. I think you girls have something to learn. I think you have to find out that you're girls. I think we might just get together, all of us mothers, and blast a little sense into your heads." Her hand was on the doorknob. "And I don't mean your kind of blast, Dr. Jekyll." She started to open the door, and at that moment there was a terrific noise. Something on the lab table flew straight up into the air, and Mrs. Gibbs went through the door like a shot. Wow! I'm surprised it didn't put that on the show. That would have been epic. And of course, Janie's parents start freaking out because their daughter had just blown something up, and then Harriet escapes out the back door. Right before she leaves, she says, "Don't give up." Janie says, "Never." So that's it for chapter 4. Wonder if anything happens in Chapter 5 relating to the whole dance saga. And yep, Chapter 5 actually picks up right there. Story continues. That night at dinner, everything was going along as usual. That is, Mr. and Mrs. Welsh were having an interminable, rambling conversation about nothing in particular, while Harriet watched it all like a tennis match. And suddenly, Harriet leaped to her feet as though she had just then remembered, and screamed, "I'll be—" Whoa! Whoa, 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 hold the phone. Can I even say that on this podcast? Was this podcast rated? I think I set the thing up so that it's rated clean, so yeah, I'd better not say that. Maybe I can spell it. Harriet says, "I'll be DAMNED if I'll go to dancing school." Yeah, they absolutely could not have used that in the show at all, or else it would have been rated PG instead of G. Harriet, Mrs. Welsh was appalled. "How dare you use words like that at the table? Or any other place, dear," interjected Mr. Welsh calmly, "including on Apple TV. "All right, I'll be finked if I go to dancing school." Harriet stood and screamed this solidly. She was throwing a fit. She only threw fits as a last resort, so that even as she did, she had a tiny feeling in the back of her brain that she had already lost. She wouldn't, however, have it said that she went down without a try. And then she and her parents argue for a little bit over proper language. Harriet says, "I will not, I will not, I will not!" She shouted at the top of her lungs. She wasn't getting the right reaction. Something was wrong. "Oh, but you will," said Mrs. Welsh calmly. "It really isn't so bad. You don't even know what it's like." "I hate it," said Mr. Welsh, and went back to his dinner. Wow. Harriet's dad didn't say that on the show. "I do so know what it's like." Harriet was getting tired of standing up and screaming. She wished she could just sit back down, but it wouldn't have done. It would have looked like giving up. "I went there once on a visit with Beth Ellen." Ooh, cool. So Beth Ellen's been there a while. "Because she had to go and I was spending the night, and you have to wear party dresses and all the boys are too short, and you feel like a hippopotamus." She said this all in one breath and screamed hippopotamus. Wow, so the idea of the boys being short was mentioned in the book. Interesting. If all the boys were too short in that version, how would Mr. Dubois have handled that? I wonder. Because on the show, Mr. Dubois had his heart set on boys being bigger and stronger than girls, but apparently that's not the case in the book. In fact, I don't even know if Mr. Dubois is in the book. Probably not. Probably some other dance teacher who is hopefully a lot nicer. Mr. Welsh laughed. "An accurate description, you must admit." This is amazing that his dad, or her dad, is just being real about this, expressing his honest opinions, whereas on Apple TV, both of her parents were trying to get her into it. And Mom says, "Darling, the boys get taller as you go along." And then Harriet gets so mad that she says, "I'll be D-word if I go." Again. She says it again. And then she gets sent to her room, or no, her mom says, "You're getting your mouth washed out with soap, young lady." Did people actually do that back then? Was that a thing? I've heard somebody mention washing out somebody's mouth with soap because they swear too much, but I thought that was just a figure of speech. And then I saw that actually happen on Pepper Ann, but I thought that was just some cartoony little joke. Did people really do that? Well, maybe they did. My grandpa was really poor, and he lived during the Great Depression, and he had to clean his teeth with soap and his finger. He didn't have toothpaste or toothbrush back then. And so then Harriet eventually does get sent to her room, and old Golly comes in to talk to her. Old Golly says, "Well now, what's this about dancing school?" "I'm not going," Harriet said meekly. "Why not?" And Harriet thought for a minute. The other reasons weren't really it. It was that the thought of being in dancing school somehow made her feel undignified. Aha! There's another direct quote. Underline that one here. Don't worry, I have my very own copy of Harriet the Spy. I'm not marking up any library books. And finally she had it. "Spies don't go to dancing school," she said triumphantly. "Oh, but they do," said old Golly. "They do not. Harriet, have you ever thought about how spies are trained? Yes, they learn languages, and guerrilla fighting, and everything about a country, so that if they're captured, they'll know all the old football scores and things like that. That's boy spies, Harriet, you're not thinking." Oof. Harriet hated more than anything else to be told by old Golly that she wasn't thinking. It was worse than any soap. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. "What about girl spies? What are they taught?" "The same things." "The same things and a few more. Remember the movie we saw about Mata Hari one night on television?" "Yes." "Well, think about that. Where did she operate? Not in the woods guerrilla fighting, right? She went to parties, right? And remember that scene with the general, or whatever he was? She was dancing, right? Now, how are you going to be a spy if you don't know how to dance?" There must be some answer to this, thought Harriet as she sat there silently. She couldn't think of a thing. She went, rather loudly. That she thought of something. Well, do I have to wear those silly dresses? Couldn't I wear my spy clothes? They're better to learn to dance in anyway. In school we wear our gym suits to learn how to dance. Hey, that's amazing! We did dances in gym class when I was in school too. I wish they would have shown that on the show. That would have been fun. The old guy says, of course not. Can you see Mata Hari in a gym suit? First of all, if you wear your spy clothes, everyone knows you're a spy. So what have you gained? No, you have to look like everyone else. Then you'll get by, and no one will suspect you. Wow, that's exactly what was going through my head when the old guy was saying that. I was surprised she didn't say any of this on the show. That would have been a little bit better, actually. But instead, on TV, she just said, to be a great writer, you have to know everything and see everything, including how to dance. Then Harriet just said it rather like before. Then Harriet sadly says, yeah, that's true. Old guy says, now, you better march downstairs and tell him you changed your mind. And so then she goes downstairs. She stood in the doorway and said with a loud voice, I've changed my mind. And he looked at her in a startled way. She turned and left the doorway abruptly. There was nothing further to be said. As she went back up the steps, she heard them burst out laughing, and then her father say, boy, that Miss Golly is magic, sheer magic. I wonder where we'd be without her. Huh, interesting. Let me look through here. Is that it? Is that all there is to it? In the book? No, not quite. There's one more thing here. She's going to talk to Janie about it. Yes, they're eating lunch at school, and they're reading the Gregory News, which is the school paper. They don't mention Bill Kilroy, though. They're reading Marion Hawthorne's editorial about candy wrappers everywhere. Turns out it was only because Miss Whitehead had talked about them on opening day. And then Sport suggests that Harriet writes something in the school paper, but Harriet says, I wouldn't do it now if they pay me. They can have their dumb paper. So I wonder who's in charge of the school paper in the book. Does Marion do it, the whole thing? I should read this book a little more thoroughly and get some answers here. That's when Harriet says, Janie, I think they've got me. What, was that sandwich poisoned? Janie stood up. The egg fell right out of Sport's mouth. He was eating a hard-boiled egg. No, Harriet said quickly. Now it was anticlimactic. I mean dancing school, Harriet said grimly. Janie sat down and looked away as though Harriet had been impolite. Dancing school, Sport squeaked, picking the egg up out of his lap. Yes, said Janie grimly. Oh boy, am I glad. My father never even heard of that. Sport grinned around his egg. Well, said Harriet sadly, it looks like I'm gonna have to if I'm gonna be a spy. Who ever heard of a dancing spy? Janie was so furious she wouldn't even look at Harriet. Matty Hari, Harriet said quietly. Then when Janie didn't turn around, she added very loudly, I can't help it, Janie. And Janie turned around and looked at her. I know, she said sadly. I'm going to. It was all right then. And Harriet ate her other tomato sandwich happily. And that's it. There's no other mention of dancing in school in the book, at least not in the first half. So in the book, both Harriet and Janie end up going, and they don't say anything about their experiences of actually being there. I mean, it does touch on Harriet's reluctance to go, but Apple TV took it a big step further.